All next to work. That's what I should do in short amount of time. And people straggling in, and that's okay. I just want to welcome you to start and talk about how we're going to spend our time tonight. We're going to do final updates on the data that we have talked about working on. We're going to do then the majority of our time talking about setting draft priorities and identifying any budget items for the. I know that might feel a little rushed or disconnected. Last week saying we needed to submit budget priorities by the 1st of December because they just on the 23rd or something. And I just said, well, can I have till the 3rd? Because the meeting was today. So we'll be able to submit the budget priorities tomorrow. We can talk at that section about how we want to handle that. Like, do we just want to do we want to say anything? Do we want to just do a couple of fruit things? But we're not going to get. We don't want to put the cart before the horse, so we want to figure out the priorities and then dive into the budget. So we'll figure that out when we get there. But just that is something we're going to talk about at some point tonight too, under the priority section. And before we move into reviewing minutes, I just wanted to hand out, I promised you last time that I would hand out the Housing Committee operating norms, just so that you would have a hard copy of that. If you wouldn't mind taking one of those. For your records, and I'll re-up them, periodically at the beginning so we can remember what we intended to do. I'm going to move into now reviewing the minutes. Did anyone have the minutes on November 4th? I sent around by email. Did anyone get a chance? Well, does anyone have any comments on the minutes? If not, can I have a motion to approve? Okay, second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, great. November 4th minutes are approved. I'd like to now just open it up for public comment.
I got a few comments.
Okay, and is there anyone online that also has comments? Just so I know that.
No.
Okay.
I'm late luncheon, so I'm not. I have to read my I have 3 quick requests and 1 warning that I hope the committee will take seriously, because you may be the last group in influencing City Hall with the expertise and the credibility to prevent avoidable mistakes. 1, ORCA coverage of housing committee meetings. In the last meeting, I asked that the committee work with ORCA to begin recording and archiving these meetings. This isn't a luxury, it's a transparency requirement. You're making recommendations that will shape the biggest housing development in Montpelier's history. ORCA already films other committees. There's no practical barrier. What's missing is a formal request from this committee, and they will check their availability to send a cameraman with a panning camera and archive the Zoom. So tonight they're going to archive the Zoom alone. So make that formal request. It protects all of us. Public access to documents, I think, I've already got that under control. Skip that. Create a public-facing repository for all related documents for this committee. The misrepresentation of HUD's low and middle income requirements. Now to the substance, there's a serious ongoing problem with how the city, specifically Mike Miller, is describing the federal low and moderate income requirement under the CDBG-DR funding. He's publicly telling the developers at the site meeting, I have a transcript, that Montpelier can satisfy HUD's 51% low and moderate income requirement by reserving a small number of units, 18 or maybe 20, while using CDBG-DR funding to pay for the entire water sewer system for a much larger housing development. This is not what HUD requires. This is not what federal guidance says. This is not what ACCD or the state should be told on Montpelier's behalf. If we repeat this misunderstanding in an RFQ or an RFP, HUD can and will treat those statements as part of our formal representation. And if it turns out to be wrong, the consequences are severe in funding delays, project redesigns, LMI compliance failures, and federal clawbacks of awarded money. This committee is the only body in city government with the subject matter expertise to stop misinformation before the city locks ourselves and our developers into non-compliant expectation. This committee has a responsibility to intervene. You don't have to choose sides in the political argument. What you need to do is insist on accuracy before the city commits itself. The other thing is about the brownfield status, because I think everybody wants us to see housing sooner than later begin to cultivate development capacity, et cetera, both on Sabins, Infill, and Country Club Road. There's a big brownfield there, and staff is representing that we've already completed phase 2. That's flat out false. We've made it maybe 10 or 20% into phase 2 of the brownfield second phase environmental site assessment. They still have to do a grid toxicology testing in 2 depths in all the fairways and all the greens in order, and then that needs to a stage where they estimate how much soil has to be removed or capped. And until that's done, developers can't put a proposal together. So we've got this problem of an RFP out to ask developers or to give them the land for $1 when they don't even know what they can build on it, and we can make a huge mistake. So what needs to happen is the traffic study, the environmental site assessment completion, the corrective action plan completion, and then an RFP. So I know that's throwing a lot at you, but this is the biggest project we're going to have to deal with. And if we do it right, it can be a really beautiful walkable village, state-of-the-art, low energy, low carbon, microtransit into town on a multi-use path. So, thanks.
Any questions for Stephen? All right. The next, is there anyone online that has emerged with their hand up for the public comment?
No.
Okay.
Online, we have Alan Goldman, Carrie Brown, Jim Sheridan.
Okay, thank you. The next part of the agenda is going into the data sharing and finishing up for the folks that weren't able to go in the last meeting and have their 5-minute overview. I think Sandy was going to do the unofficial housing survey and talk about market-based development. I see that she is not here or online, and so I'll move past that. Dan and Alex and Matt, I think you wanted some time to talk about. Did you finish, Alex? I think you said a couple. Right. Yeah, I think you had a couple more things. I think you maybe covered all that whole stuff. Do you have anything to add? Because I know you're online.
The stuff that I went over, I sent you the slideshow. Now it seems like maybe not, but we can take over that. We're setting the priorities, so it's really more information than anything. The only thing that kind of relates is to Steve's point about the brownfield and the CDBG grant. But even then, it's not. It doesn't dive into the technical sense of what we brought up. So I'm happy to move that another month.
Okay.
If we want to for the
Great. Alex, I know you you have a couple.
Very quick statement about the table, because I talk about just the possibility that federal funding will continue to be unstable. And federal funding funds will stay, and they would also be finished. And that we might want to think about.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well.
Okay, that we might want to think about local philanthropy, local investment, both investments in time and investments possibilities in, for lack of a better term. But we would need publicity to sort of awaken to the investment. And corollary to that in many grant applications, the demonstration of existing local interest and investment disciplines. So that would strengthen that we go forward. And the last thing is that in the federal grant, there are also quite a lot of small institutions Pictures. We should not be excited about it.
Andy, over to you.
I am really sorry, folks. Luckily, Tim emailed me. Had a very long day driving through the storm, and I was just starting with supper, which was actually my lunch. And so I hope I can be organized. We have
We're having a hard time with that. So,
I really can't do this without you.
okay,
So we can postpone, I finally postponed.
we can postpone it, because we'll be then talking about priorities without the benefit of it. But that's,
Zero.
yeah,
I
that's
thought
okay.
it was going to be.
All right, keep working on it.
All I could do was talk, and I didn't know if they would hear it. I was up in the spot, so.
I'm sorry, Sandy. Yesterday I came and tested it and it worked fine.
Yeah.
And I did a Zoom call with my office to make sure it worked fine. And today, so both of the other cables had shorts that I've been using, which is why it wasn't working. So now I've stretched the cable that I used yesterday. So now it's working.
Matt, even if it didn't work out, I'm grateful to you and you've been in the world. So, but this is exciting. Thank you.
So then, Sandy, I want to make sure that he has his slides, though.
I do have my phone.
Okay.
So, and I emailed them at least to you.
You did, and then I think I didn't realize that I should forward them to Matt.
Okay.
So I can look
you
them
and I can
up.
both look right now for our email.
Yeah.
And something like that.
I got it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is it called Montpelier Housing Presentation?
Yes.
Matt, if I email this to you, will you? Mhm.
Okay.
Is there any preamble you'd like to do while I'm giving this into Matt's hands?
No, if anybody is interested in paper copies of things, I have extra copies of the unofficial housing survey and this really great article called The Great Depression, which is about how size is getting smaller in the United States.
Yeah, I did share those.
Yeah, they're all digital, but sometimes people prefer paper.
Okay, Matt, I have sent it to you. Is there, like lighting up there? Is it, anyone can, you know, is there like a light switch that we could?
The other thing is, as part of the Plainfield Village expansion, we held a new home fair in September. We had 26 vendors there, and they were showing turnkey houses, shells, kits, and there were some architectural services, banking information. It was just a useful, I think, booklet if anybody wants a copy of that. You can get it afterwards. Okay.
I haven't gotten Alyssa's email yet.
Good news is it's really easy to read with the links off. Thank you.
Yeah.
We did go through, so it should pop up soon, especially the block.
It's probably a big file though, right? For those of you online, I'm sorry it's so dark, we had to turn the lights off, but in a minute I'll share a file with you and you'll be able to see it through the presentation.
I would for later.
And while we're waiting for this to come in, I'll say what's going to happen once we get to the priorities, which is we have Christian Loring from the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission here to talk about the survey results that we submitted that each committee member sent in, and they'll share back with you themes and the data trends around some of those themes, which will be really helpful context, I think, as we then go into discussing the priorities. So they'll do 15 minutes as an overview and some Q&A around that, and then we can discuss. And I have sent around a spreadsheet that I wanted to use to frame that conversation. I also have other copies if people didn't get a chance
I
to
didn't see it.
see that, so I'll hand those out.
So they shared each other's comment, our various comments.
They
So
did,
we
yeah.
can see them.
Yeah, they did, and that wasn't the paper copy that I have, but I'm sure that they'll go through the highlights of those. Sandy, maybe you should try forwarding it as well, if for some reason it's not liking my email right now.
Okay.
What domain are you sending from? Email?
Gmail, yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
I only have one bar.
Okay,
Is there?
well, we can, I think we'll give it a minute or two, and then we can, we'll have to move into priorities and come back.
So I have it here, I can try forwarding it to.
And MJELACIC. Okay.
We're gonna move into the regional planning commission overview, and then we'll move back to you, Sandy, and then we'll talk about the hearing.
That's just showing
Good morning.
search results. We're just showing the search results.
No,
The findings about
it's mine.
the themes that we
Mine.
pulled out of
Okay,
the
And
this survey that we made.
Showing whatever you there instead.
no, just, that's on my side.
Sandy, you said you
You
didn't
keep
get
something from me, it's not true.
anyone else? And then I passed out to some of you who were here a little earlier, how we downloaded those themes to the data. That.
One more here.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
There we go. Right on that. And then we'll just be walking through that document I just handed out. First, let me just take a step back and review our work here with the committee. Just remind everyone of our role. So we're contracted to do a housing needs assessment as it's defined by the VHFA methodology. So that's sort of the proposal we put together with the municipality, and it's based on their prescriptive process that of data collection and then community engagement identified. So throughout this, you'll see our work may be adjacent to some of your priorities, and that we're trying to fill our scope of work and make sure we provide that final document as we said it would be. So part of it was the survey that Pamela conducted. Unfortunately, she's on leave and has all her knowledge with her. But Lori and I are racing to try to catch up on some of that. And we'll try to do our best job of standing in for her this evening. The first document that was distributed via email are those themes. We've identified 13 themes, I think probably 2 more than were in the original email possible. But I'll go over the last 2 as we get to them. And then some of the supporting language that was pulled out of the survey. So just to help everyone recognize their own thoughts and priorities as you put them down and see that they continue through and work on it. As I said, we need to then tie those themes back into the data. So it's what Hannah had been trying to pull feedback related specifically to the tables and charts that she put into the thicker packet that all of you had a chance to look through.
what we're doing tonight is looking at those needs and showing how your priorities relate to the data we're seeing, and how we have identified some areas where we want to try to find some more data. That again, this is where we're playing catch up, and you know, there are other issues like census.gov is still down, so some of the data when we go to get it, it's not necessarily available, wasn't available to bring with some of that those new requests into the report as we complete eventually. But what I'm going to do is kind of run through and feel free page by page to jump in with any questions or conclusions that you may not see reflected in our analysis. So high level, the first theme is the severe housing shortage and high costs. I kind of view this one at that 30,000 foot level. And here we want to try to bring a little more data in around income and median home prices. We got some good feedback on the data around that and what some committee members thought would be helpful to help them understand and see those relationships. But that aside, we have some other data sets like the days on market, some of the overall demographic trends, declining population, actually increasing number of housing units modestly, but that's offset more significantly by decrease in housing size in the last 7 years that Montpelier's experience, going from average household size of 3 people, for example, down to roughly 2 today, which just puts more pressure on the market. We also mentioned that from the last tables Pamela brought forward, in most industries, if you were to afford the median household price in Montpelier, you would need 2 income. And then there are other industries where even two household incomes might not be enough to clear the bar for a median in Montpelier. Second theme was barriers in permitting and appeals in the regulatory process. We don't really have any data to support this from our methodology. We do see that on average, there's 5 homes permitted every year in Montpelier. Some of the data that might be in your packet showed between 1 and 2 houses. That's the census data versus the Vermont data that's been collected. This is not necessarily causation. Low number of new permits is not necessarily caused by the difficulty in the permitting process, but we also saw in our expert interviews as well that this was a theme that came up. Go ahead.
I sit on the DRB, and I'm not sure that we're capturing what's going on, because just in the 18 months I've been on the DRB, we've done subdivisions and properties at least. I don't think necessarily constructed, but in the meadow, on Elm Street, up on Gold Hill, up on Ford, just trying to remember, and I'm picking non-controversial ones. But there's been a lot of action, so I think sort of going into that a little bit might be helpful, because that's coming on it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the idea of tracking and finding where they fall off the timeline, the procedure, the process would be really key. And I don't know if the planning commission has the ability to do interviews, but when it hears around town that it takes a crazy long time to get something permitted, I mean, it could be as easy as putting a post on Front Porch Forum and asking people to share success or frustration stories.
Mm-hmm.
That may not meet your words for rigor, but
I know that we have the data, but it's difficult to translate the data into publicly accessible formats. There's a technology translation problem that Nick is working to overcome. Nick is the guy in the office who does all this stuff for us. So just yesterday, we were talking about a dashboard that would show numbers of permits being issued in real time. It is updated in the weekly report, like the
But after the first week, you need to go to parcel number to find out what's happening.
Yeah.
So it doesn't accumulate permits, which I actually.
Yeah. It's an ongoing discussion and the problems are structural in terms of software that's being used.
Just would be really interested to know, 10 started the process, only 8 made it past design review. And then only 4 made it to be, I'm just making a comparison. And then 2 got appealed, and at the end of the assembly line, 0 action got done.
Tim?
I just like to feed that. I think part of the thing I would also want to look at is of the number of permits issued, maybe the data is already showing it, how many homes actually end up being built. How many people get through this process with all these conditions that get put on and all these engineering reports they have to produce and all these steps that didn't used to have to happen to build a good home in Montpelier, and look at the numbers and just go, oh my God, I'm over my head. I can't do this. And they don't build the home.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a factor in our current process.
Is that something you'd be interested that you might be able to consider, Christian, is like a table that looks at that kind of data?
We have to think about it a little bit. 2 things. One, coming out of the study, we're looking for recommendations and next steps. It
Yeah.
feels like the planning department is already on this and working on this idea of a dashboard where you can start tracking the data.
Mm-hmm. So perhaps it's a recommendation for the planning department if there already has some momentum around that.
I think this isn't my part of the shop in the planning department. I think having a clear signal from this committee and from the report would be useful because it might be a question of resources, like better software or another person, whatever, just to handle the paperwork.
Okay.
Even though the idea is clear, the practicality of implementing it is challenging.
So Dan and then Alex.
My question was, it seems like there's no data to show that Montpelier is an outlier with difficulty. Not that there's no difficulty overall, is that correct, or is that?
That was something I was thinking about today. Is there a way to compare how many permits have been issued versus how many you would expect to see issued given a community of certain size and population? So we are still thinking about how to package the data to kind of answer that question. Like, are we on track with our peers? Or are we falling ahead? Are we falling behind? Or are we ahead? I don't know if it'll be successful being able to pull it together. So right now I don't know, but that's something we're thinking about. Hopefully we'll have the next iteration of our data block.
Right.
In the national conversation about this, zoning functions as a kind of filter. Right, it's the thing you can point to and say this is what's standing in the way. But the things that they recommend, Montpelier's already put into place some smaller lot sizes, density. Well, there's a period, I think, of adjustment where people get pissed off that all of a sudden their single family neighborhood might have the triplex in it. But the rules are there to enable that. And I'm assuming that will be there's a couple of cases I know that have been appealed in my experience, but only a couple. And I'm assuming the environmental forum will rule in favor of permits. There's nothing wrong with
Thousands of dollars later.
Yeah.
Years.
So I'm gonna come to in years, I'm gonna come to Sandy and then we'll go back to you, Christian, to move us forward. Unless you have something. But I'm gonna go, hang on, Sandy, you, Christian, okay.
Super quick, small point. I did an analysis of subdivision regulations in many towns last spring with Nikki. And we were looking at Plainfield subdivision rules, and there were 2 completely separate warning, appeal, and this very, and the decision in between. And because there were 2 rounds, it basically doubled and it turned the whole zoning process and subdivision process into like 5 months, 4 to 5 months. And so some towns in Vermont only have 1, and they have an optional three, but then I can't remember where Montpelier stands. This is a super small point, but if Montpelier has any remnants of a two-phase approval with both with appeal possibilities to the federal court, really should be eliminated.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, to Alex's point, and yeah, you're reinforcing the same thing, is that the thing that I'm saying that's different about, I guess it's maybe not just about Montpelier specifically, but different about Vermont, is the ease with which we can appeal, or projects can be appealed. I'm involved in 2 appeals right now. And I know other affordable housing developers in Montpelier, at least 2 others that are out there right now, about to go to environmental court. And yeah, it's a massive holdup, and I think I see it more specifically with affordable projects.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm gonna have you take
Sure.
this for it.
Sure. Harder to come by data on permitting. I see it's something that's also the group is passionate about. So we'll see what we can scrape together and find some more information to support your work. Vacant and underused and converted buildings. A couple things here. Some things here. You do see a slight increase in the number of rentals over time. This may indicate some of those vacant spaces being moved into the rental market. But while there was a small drop in vacant properties following between before pre-COVID and after COVID, it kind of held steady since 2020 or so. It hasn't continued dropping. This is surprising to me. Might be an opportunity for to push those numbers down. There's a category in their census called other vacancy, which is the largest category of vacancy in Montpelier. It would be nice to look under that rock and understand what those vacant properties are exactly. And it's
Do you have a copy of this you could share with Matt?
then Joe Blaine.
That's
That's the census data, yeah, so that's not the same as the survey feedback, but at least to give you the names that we're talking about.
Is there a definition of the state?
Yes, there is a definition of vacant. I probably have it in here. I don't know what page.
The other category in the census data includes seasonal homes and also for any other reason. It's an awful categorization.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder, because I live at the end of what I call MHC problem. There's probably 20 apartments essentially that I can see from my thing. And some of those buildings, they're just changed names. Montpelier has a bunch of, what's the term of art? Non-arm's length transactions.
Sandy, and then we'll come back to Christian.
For this, the previous housing committee had suggested that there be an inventory, and I see that recommendation at the bottom here, but it's very specific on your paper. So it seems that the committee was suggesting that inventory of commercial space be done as well, separating out converted from residential at some point in time. But a shell game could be played with like if you look at the post office right now, half of it is really not being used. And there's other unused spaces. There could be a shell game that buildings that are not really appropriate for housing could be more effectively office space. And Barry did this inventory, and then they went one step further to figure out how to incentivize the desired changes. And so I think that depth of recommendation is missing from what I see.
Yeah, we're not recommendations. Yeah, we work towards that.
But I think that it's important to make that next step.
Yeah, we can find Barry, and we're going to kind of craft some of those on best practices, but ideas.
And also vacant land.
Vacant land. That would be another study. That's something we've done with various cities.
But there's some very obvious places that would be good for housing.
Appreciate the feedback. It's exactly what we're looking for. Can you just tell me when it's time? We'll set, I won't drag too far on. Need for more affordable housing types.
You have about 6 minutes, but I think we should get a little more than that. But if we could keep it, I think
Yeah.
we can do 10, that'd be
Sure.
great.
Sure, I can shoot for that. So one piece of the data that was clear and that some committee members called out is the percentage of Montpelier renters, especially that applies to owners as well, that are cost burden in their housing. Clearly supports this idea that we need more affordable housing. Again, calling out the stat I mentioned earlier that looking at the median household price in Montpelier, it's hard to imagine affording that with your typical employee, depending on their industry in which they work. I mean, I didn't put it in here. Another point that comes to mind is that there are also a variety of affordable housing models that are called out in the data package. And some of those seem to have been more successful than others over the course of the last 35 years or so. Some have led to 60 plus units, some have led to 7 or 8. So that there are different models of affordable housing that seem to have been more effective in Montpelier than others might be something that we're considering. Senior housing as a top priority, I just think more reflected in our demographic data we saw. I enjoyed some of the comments that Bill had pulled out for us, including that this is not new to the conversation in Montpelier. As far back as 1960, they were calling out a high portion of older residents in Vermont. So continues to be an area where probably it'll be an issue 70 years from now as well. Certainly we saw in the demographics that your boomers are your largest demographic, followed by our millennials, which makes sense. So that second wave recommendations that work for boomers today are going to work for millennials 20 years from now. So there's an opportunity for consistency across those generations and those demographic bubbles. There is a bit of a dip in the Gen Xers there between the two cohorts, but we don't necessarily have an explanation for that. That's all that.
I think in general, Gen X is one of the smallest generations, so that may that's fine.
Yeah.
But there are a few things.
One advantage we did notice in the data that I think is also worth calling out that is not just shortages is that relative to other municipalities in Vermont and certainly the county, Montpelier has a proportionally higher amount of 0-bedroom and single-bedroom facilities, which may be an opportunity to be something we can age into. It shows that once there's existing market demand, but also given the demographics, maybe that it's an opportunity for future direction of the housing market.
Alex?
I have a question about what used to be called SROs, single room,
Okay.
which are not shelters, but sort of like and they're not dorms like the dorms, but like boarding houses or situations, given the homeless population situations. Well, there's two varieties. There's the homeless population and there's travel nurses. And they're different. And they need sort of different accommodations. But I saw that you added a theme of homeless, but I think stable, I mean, I think the term now is basically housing, but stable, single room housing, not studio apartments, that is really important for solving what's going on in Montpelier.
Angie? Both number 4 and later on seem to miss something you started to talk about, which is 0 and 1 bedroom homes. I mean owned homes, not multifamily, although they could be, but owned homes, not rentals. That is a very high demand for that. I think it was between 9 and 16% of people are interested in. And it's important to point out a market obstacle for that, which is because we do not have enough existing stock of 0 and 1 bedroom homes. They do qualify for conventional mortgages, but because there are not enough to create comparables in an appraisal, then the buyers cannot have a conventional mortgage, which really affects grant subsidies and interest. It affects a lot of things, insurability.
These would be unattached, single and zero,
Detached,
detached. That's
yeah,
correct.
or duplexes, but they can still be owned, completely owned, if we finally got 0 lot lines. So this is what other cities do. And once they become more available for resale, then those buyers or owners can have a conventional mortgage, which would bring them much more into the reach. I have actually heard from Downstreet that they only approve 1 of every 3 applications for a 2-bedroom house. So they're just not interested in very small homes because it's harder to get the conventional mortgage. And we have a number of banks that are willing to offer portfolio mortgages, but we have not kind of connected all these dots and actually brought this around to what the market's asking for.
Short-term rentals, removing housing stock was theme number 6 that came out of the surveys. Well, are the data sources, I've heard people question it, whether we actually have 70 to 80 units on the market, or if that's potentially double counting based on the way this data source works, is a valid point. But you can imagine a world where those 70, for example, units went back on the market. That's like 10 to 15 years of new houses immediately showing up back in market. So that's certainly something to take seriously, although again, it may require a deeper dive and go towards some examples of what other communities are doing to address this. Housing trust fund support. This isn't one we're going to be able to provide a lot of support with our data, just because the data doesn't get into that area. There are a couple of themes in here that are kind of outside of what the data package supports. Or opportunities for redevelopment of city-owned and underused properties. Again, this is one where there really isn't data to support that. The data doesn't correlate with it. It's not that it doesn't support it, it's just there's not a connection there. There are ways to look at this. Certainly the city has, most of the working way to do it is run it through a couple filters in the GIS, slow zoning, et cetera, and get a pretty good idea of how many acres potentially publicly owned land is available. And I'm not considering some of the more obvious parcels like that. CRPC has undertaken that process with Berry City on their request 2 years back. We have to share that document.
Can you add the Court Street parking lot to that?
Court Street.
Court Street and I actually think that you can get 28 units along Court Street without losing any parking spaces.
Need for incremental infill and missing middle development. A little trickier to slice this one out. We need to work a little longer on this and what data sets we link to it. But we do see stuff around the drop off in renter households when they move to from a 3 to a 4-person household. This might indicate a lack of supply for that market in Montpelier. You see an ongoing growth of rentals for detached and small multifamily rentals as an area of strength and year-over-year growth in the data. that I think again supports that missing middle classification of housing.
Why, so if it's small multifamily, it'd be 2 to 4 unit maybe?
I think it's listed as 2 to 9.
Okay, well, 2 to 4 actually, I think makes sense because it makes a big difference in fire safety regulations. But I continue to wonder why single family homes are not mentioned at all. So, I mean, the one
Attached?
seems more like a typo. So, yes, but small lots.
Well, basically, not unlike the traditional mortgage issue you identified earlier, it's not in the data. So we're reflecting on.
That people want to own rather than rent.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
It's not that the
Well, it
data
seems
doesn't
like we need to
exist.
figure that out.
It's
Because
the data package that we reviewed that included that sort of granularity or specific questions.
Did it pulls out multifamily? It identifies multifamily but not single family?
It identifies single family, but you can't distinguish between a 2,600-foot house and a 400-foot house or a 1,200-foot house.
We're going to move on in just.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So this was a big one, missing middle. I think we're going to keep working on the data on that. The last few are a little more straightforward. We talked about community friction. There's not a lot of overlap with the data and community friction. We do see an increase in remote workers. It's not for us to say what that means for the community. We talked a lot about last time where how Montpelier functions as an employment hub. Rather than a housing, a bedroom community, as we often call them, where you have 2.5 jobs for every one household in Montpelier. These seem to create a certain amount of cultural friction, may help shed light on some of the priorities we are developing. The last two that come up are around folks experiencing homelessness. The point in time counts are very clear. The table that the numbers are rising significantly over the last 5 years. And then the other table showing that some model of affordable housing has been more successful. In fact, I would reflect on final thoughts is sort of our first draft. For those who I didn't introduce, Lori, Bamber, and I tried to pick up the way where Pam is able to come back from the week that she's on. So we're going to try filling in by to introduce Lori. So
Thanks for being here, Lauren. Thank you, Christian. And thanks for picking this up when it's hard to come into a project in the middle or 75% of the way in.
can't be that difficult to solve the housing problem.
Montpelier, yes, so thank you for that. So next steps on this is, and Lori and Christian will stay with us. And so this isn't the last time we're going to discuss this even tonight. Like priorities will come up, we'll go back to the data, or we'll go back to some of the conversations, some of the overview we just had. And thank you for staying for that part of the conversation.
The only thing I'll add is in our next version, you will see us now trying to connect the themes and the data back to your municipal plan and its goals and actions.
Yes, and that's perfect because we were talking about we are going to be potentially on a different timeline in setting our priorities. And so tying it to the municipal plan and the city goals are really will have co-benefits both with our work in setting our priorities, but also with the city council getting that data on the timeline that they need and the timeline you were contracted to do. So thank you for that. We'll come back to this in a few minutes. Sandy, I want to get it over to you for a few minutes to do that overview. And then right around 7:05, I would like to move to starting to talk about those priorities, which of course your data and everything we've said will help with funnel attention.
What I'd like to do is use my entire 10 minutes to speak. It's normally about a 30-minute talk, and I'm going to condense it down to 10 minutes.
Right.
And someone please let me know if it starts to get to be 9 minutes, and I'm going to seem to be close to the end. And I think Matt is turning off the lights.
John's on it. Thank you, John.
So Stuff off the screen.
Oh, maybe in a second.
All right. So a lot of this, we all being in Vermont already know, but it's important to get out. I'm gonna wait till, so Vermont, very much in central Vermont, we're used to very large homes and it's there. So in the United States, 2,000 square foot average home. If you look at other European countries, India is actually 440 square feet. Next slide, please. At the same time, we had a habit of settling right down to the rivers, although originally it was on hilltops. And they're becoming harder to build on. And we have the issues of speculation. Most people here are probably familiar with the state's housing report from last year that in 2021, almost a third of renters could buy a home if they wanted to, and it's down to 6% now. That is a stunning statistic. Next. The current solutions that we have they're important, and I don't want to put them down, but there's some problems with each of them. So subsidized housing does fill an important need, but it should not be the only way we solve our housing problem. This 47-unit building costs $25 million to build. It's assessed at $7 million. This is not great for how we use our housing subsidy money. And it's not great for brainless for towns. South Burlington has a deeper pocket, so they have a lot more on their grand list for commercial than Montpelier. So that's a very important issue to think about. Renting does not help people build equity over time. Most people do want to own a house next in order to grow equity. Shared equity homes have some inherent problems. And we're only just figuring those out, how they appreciate over time with the deed covenant. A lot of people are not aware that you cannot rent any portion of the house. You cannot have a business that's beyond some minor thing on caring for a few children. They also, as a person exits, they get only a small portion of the appreciated value of the house. Next, please. So I did this housing survey in May, and shared it in July. And one of the big problems is that most people are not aware of the average household size in Montpelier. Look, nearly 3/4 is 1 or 2 people. In order to buy a house, they would happily buy a 1-bedroom building or even a 0-bedroom building in order to own the house. So very important to keep in mind that most of the shared equity homes, including Habitat for Humanity, are 3 bedrooms or 4-bedroom units. They're creating a lot larger, like 1,200 square feet, a lot larger home than people actually can afford to buy. Next. So my survey is accurate within 6% margin of error. And for the Montpelier area, 82% of people wanted to own the house. I think that is really important to think about for long-term viability of our finances in Montpelier. The tradition since I had lived here as an adult for 35 years is that when you're ready to build a house or own a house, you move out of Montpelier. You go to East Montpelier, and the number of new houses in East Montpelier, Plainfield, Berlin, are much higher compared to Montpelier over the last 30 years. And I think that we have been building buildings that are far too large. 350 square feet is basically a cabin, or you could say a cottage, but people in my survey would rather buy something that small than live in a large multifamily house. Next. And then we have outdated values about the lot size. Vermont has big people on lot sizes compared to the rest of the United States. And if you look at developments down in Florida and other places, and back 200 years in our cities, a 30th of an acre is not an uncommon size with 0 lot lines. So it's a completely owned, called fee simple house. It's not a condominium. They just own from property line, side yard to side yard. And it's a row house. You can see them in Baltimore, Boston, New Jersey, Philadelphia, New York, etc. That is a viable way to build and to subdivide. Next. Also,
We're about halfway through.
perfect. I think I am too. So a lot of developments include 2-car garages when most people in Montpelier don't even have 2 cars. And then they are happy to not have a garage at all, half. Next. When I kind of sugared down the information from my survey, there is a discrepancy between what people desire, and part of it's what's available, so that's what they know, versus what they can afford. And my experience is when you talk to someone who's stuck in this, they cannot qualify for a mortgage for a house that they think they want to get. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes for them to realize they could easily have a smaller lot or a smaller home with fewer bedrooms. So people are very smart, and it's just, unfortunately, it's a problem of lack of cultural change so far. Next. So I could shift these and align to where almost everybody, except in the 30 to 40 percentile, did not buy a market rate home. And that was what this house fair showed, is that we can build homes for under $200,000. Next. And that's including the lot. That's an all-in house. So I made a profile for developers to think about. And the next sheet is a quote calculator for people who are buying. This is just a first round of information from my 145 people that were looking. But think about this, say you were shopping and the bank tells you, I was just talking to someone yesterday, she's a single person, she qualifies for a $195,000 mortgage. If she could have a calculator that says, oh, well, you can have a little bit more land if you're willing to give up a bedroom, this is useful knowledge to have. And everybody kind of shift whether they need more building or more land. Next. So that's what this fair was about. Just giving you 3 examples. New frameworks in Plainfield, they build shells or turnkeys. Up and this just built a factory in Barrie. They are turning out houses for about 100 to 130,000. And Groton Timber Works is one of my favorite framing companies. They build SIP wall structures. And another great one is it's called Vermont Foam, and they build all SIP structures too. These are incredibly affordable. Next. Working on Plainfield, I'm glad to talk about that with people separately. It is still moving forward. It did not get a grant, but for the CDBG, but it is moving forward. We're still thinking 40 lots. And next, I think that was it. Oh, looking at the revenue for this. So my example was lots between 25 and 35,000. Action would generate for Plainfield would generate almost $12 million of an increment, and it makes it possible to build the infrastructure with a chip TIF. That would pay down is something like 10 or 12 years. I could have done the math wrong, but I have shown it to a retired economist, and he blessed my numbers. So you could also call for a smaller increment, in other words, smaller requirements for the houses to be built and stretch the payment out to 20 years. That would give the city more income in those first 20 years. If you stretch them, there's oh God, anyways, I don't need to get into that. I'll turn this up. All right, I think That was it. Oh, so there you go. Typical development means a whole bunch of subsidies. And this small lot alternative, you can see the assessed value is significantly higher. The cost of construction, including having more roads, is about the same. And then the homeowners are basically the engine for the development. And because of that higher assessed value, you can actually get a larger chip TIF that will pay for the, I don't think it would need any subsidy beyond the chip TIF. I think that was really it. Thank you.
You're like, no. Nice job. Nice job. Nice job. You did an excellent job, Sandy. Thank you. I just want to give a couple of questions and then we'll move forward. But you were saying like 260 or 240 respondents on different slides. You were saying how many people responded. How did you solicit that population? Like who did you survey?
I posted from the forum. It was advertised in the Bridge and the Comes Argus.
Okay.
There was a collection box at the City Hall.
Okay.
So we tried to get out word as much as possible. And 262 respondents actually.
Yeah.
Of those, most of the, many were happy in their homes. 145 wanted to are considering moving. I would like to live in something different from what they live in.
Thank you. Other questions? Yeah.
I think we should, I'd love to talk to you for like 3 hours about all this. But just a couple of ones, the row houses, 0 lot lines. I mean, to me, the Philadelphia row house is about perfect housing fund, but most of those were built with, as a single development. They were piecemeal added in by the owner. Is that something that you looked at as something that is as one developer?
Yeah, so there's a limit on how many can be built in a row before you have to go to fire suppression systems, and you can't just rely on separation, but fire resistant walls. So I'm actually working on this with Huntington right now, and they're working on another project where we're trying to get 4 in a row, and then you can have just 10 feet between and then start with more, and then so that could become a pedestrian alley. When this is tied in with the front of the house being a pedestrian way, maybe allowing bikes or golf carts, and the back alley becomes where the cars are, this is a really powerful way to have a pedestrian community. And then those little spaces between the houses become a great way to tie things together and get people, their path to parking closer. So there's a whole bunch of solutions. You can have more than 4. You just have to have more fire protection. And then the key thing is to have a 20 in Vermont, because I've already worked about with fire safety. You have to have a 20-foot lane that's clear for a fire engine to get down and be able to protect. But it doesn't have to be a car lane. It can be a bike lane or pedestrian path. But they just need to, it has to be kept. They prefer 20 feet, so that lets 2 vehicles pass.
Thank you. Other questions? I'm saying it's an enormous amount of work. Thank you so much.
It has been my project for a year and a half. That drawing that was the first one is the rendering we did for Plainfield.
Yeah.
And they're tiny lots of a 25 millimeter. And people seem to be in love with their new frameworks houses. Yeah. And it's a little cluster. We're learning a lot of things about how many you can cluster and still be comfortable. I am delighted to talk about this more with people.
We could never tell.
And I will pay for the copy.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm so glad we got to do that before we talk about priorities.
Yeah. So
that seems like a great order. We're going to move into talking about priorities now. Yay. And I would like to spend, I'm hoping we're spending like 30 minutes on this topic, and then we're moving into the budget conversation, which should flow from the priorities. So I sent around a spreadsheet. There's a copy of it here as well. In this spreadsheet, I proposed a framework essentially. So this is how I proposed this framework. I took your information that I took the information that we covered in the data review in the first meeting, the information that Christian sent and Lori sent to me around what was coming up in the survey, and then Warren's email that we got, but she couldn't be here tonight, Lauren Pearl, and then put together basically just a straw document, a very drafty document to talk through. But and we just got from Christian Lloyd more information on like those major themes. Big picture, I think process-wise, why don't we talk process and then we can talk substance, but process-wise, and given the experience of this committee in the past, I want to make sure that we're doing touch points with council early and providing options and probably fewer options and and then if we can get some traction around a few things, expand over time. So that's the initial thinking that I'm proposing to you on process. So what that would look like exactly is that we align on categories of priorities today, that we then potentially designate like a point person or two for each category to put together like under the initiative category. You can see here like 2 or 3 top initiatives in that category based on the research, or your past experience on the committee. And then we can bring that to council to get directional feedback. So for example, it might be like, if we're looking at new policies to promote housing, you might bring up vacancy tax, cap on short-term rentals or air rights and say like, are you interested in any of this? Are you willing to, do you want us to explore any of this? So, and then after we get that feedback of like a thumbs up, thumbs down, or like, yeah, just we're open, we can bring back a more formal recommendation with numbers and, units and all that. So that is the proposal, my proposal for the process, but that me tonight is starting really high level on the categories. And getting some alignment on that and identifying people who might want to work on those categories. And this is just my first take at that. So we can change this for sure. But what are your reactions to the process or to the categories?
What was council asking us? What was due yesterday that works? Can you remind me?
Yeah, we're going to do that next. Okay. They need budget proposals from us yesterday, literally yesterday. They needed it, not metaphorically. They gave me to tomorrow to provide that. I don't want to do like cart before the horse too much here and move forward a bunch of big ticket like tax items that we've done no research on, no vetting, no community outreach on. That said, I did meet with Kelly Murphy today, city manager, current city manager, interim city manager, to talk about the process, to get feedback on the process, and to talk about the budget. And there is openness to certain ideas like the doing the housing fund, funding the housing trust fund. And, even if we only put forward that, there could be something. But let's get to that next, if you don't mind. Yeah, but just as we go through the conversation, note, okay, this is a budget issue, like we're running less, we can come back to it. Yes, Alex.
So one of the things that surprised me about being on this committee was, one, I have no idea where the Country Club Road project sits in relation to this committee, because that seems to be in its own. And second, and it's been a good thing, is I had no idea that the Central Vermont Region Planning Commission was a resource, a required resource. And it's come up in terms of the term alignment. So I'm not sure where the restricted zones come in.
Yeah.
Is the Country Club Road project something that we can productively talk about or not?
Yeah.
And what happens if we get out of alignment?
Well,
and because it doesn't seem like we have
yeah.
It just surprised me.
Well, in terms of the Country Club Road, it is on this list under support housing on city-owned properties as an idea. And these are just the first cut, like, if it wasn't on this list, you could certainly add it and make the case for that. I do think it's worth, as we go through this conversation, thinking about where this committee could have the greatest impact. And we might have different opinions about that around the table. So I'll leave that open and we can come back to that. But some might argue, well, that process is moving. We should get on it. We should shape it. Others might argue, why get involved in that process right now? Because there is a lot of steam behind it. So maybe we should pick a different project, and you could make cases and arguments on either side.
I'm not advocating for anything, only that it's a bit of an outcome.
Yeah, I totally agree. Other thoughts on the process or the structure? And I think that's what this, if we did do this framework, the support housing on city-owned properties, that those one or two people who were point on that would need to wrestle with that and bring it back to the spirit. Sandy.
I'd like to suggest, I'm looking at your priorities, that we actually stack them from the most important to the least important. And
Once we have a list that people agree on, sure.
right.
Yeah.
But I think that we might be able to do that just by quickly, I have some kind of point system or something and score, but I actually think the first three that you have are really, really, really important. I would simply move up the advocate for redevelopment up a little higher on this.
Okay. So you're comfortable with these categories, you just would reorder them?
Because I think it's important that we have it.
Yeah, sure.
Or maybe you first want to figure out if we've missed something.
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay.
The only thing I feel like is been missed a little bit that I see here kind of is the effect of tax stabilization and abatement on our financial health as a city.
Yeah, okay.
I
So
think it's slightly separate from offering tax stabilization.
yeah. So that might be something that you would make sure that does get assessed.
That's the only thing I would like to suggest to we add as a
Yeah,
separate thing.
Just to respond to that really quick, is the abatement, is the amount of abatement something that the city has any control over whatsoever?
Yes.
Other thoughts on the categories? Is this
What I go
workly sit with you? Yes.
see is, I've been thinking a lot about housing possibilities where there's already infrastructure. So, not better.
Yeah.
But that's not anywhere here. I mean, that is a infill, right?
I think it's redevelopment.
That under redevelopment.
I think we can just add infill as a. But that is what a lot of these are, infill. Yeah, it's like,
The important subset of infill should be what could help get our district heat into the black. So it prioritizing.
yeah, co-benefits, looking for that. Yeah.
Along the district heat path.
Sandy?
I just want to throw out an example for people with this info. I think it's still for sale, a very small lot on Main Street, just above Loomis. And below it, at one point this summer, there was a house for sale on Harrison Avenue. It was a flip. I could get six homes on that. It was by joining those two lots together. There could have been 4 single-family homes and 1 duplex on that small lot. And then if we could unlock that kind of development potential, it wouldn't have needed any funding. It would have made somebody a lot of money. The flip guy sold the house really fast, so the idea really well. But if we could have someone like Matt or somebody be appointed to be able to reach out to people and connect with potential financing folks, we would have a powerhouse of infill development.
The state is considering land bank, and municipalities can set up land banks. And land banks can receive property exactly that way and hold it until the rest of the stuff is out. Now that's a pretty big shift. I mean, land trusts, land banks are pretty big shifts in thinking. But it might be something we want to put on the table here, maybe not now, but later. But the legislator ordered a report on that.
But I'm just trying to, so besides the idea of 6 small families being able to either own or rent their homes, it would have added, if those 2 properties were on the market for a total of 400, those 6 houses would have been worth at least 1.2 million.
I'm gonna bring us back to the categorical priorities. Thank you. We
I
can,
just want to give that example from.
Dan, did you have something on that category? Okay. Dan over here, Tim, Sean, do you have thoughts on this? Structure, the categories, Steve, would you add anything, take anything off? You feel fine with it? Yeah. How do you feel?
Yeah.
Good enough for now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the other categories, I think the points that have been raised are maybe additional buckets or columns as far as flagging where there's dollars versus cost involved. I think the point where was to need curb some benefits and things, but I think as far as the categories themselves.
Okay. So then I would like to think about, these are just the initiatives that seem plausible or live in Montpelier right now, and then in the next category with, hearing you saying like, what about adding a land bank? What about adding effective tax stabilization? Maybe doing more to call out infill, looking at just our co-benefits. These are things that could be added. When you think about the number of units, can we talk about that for a minute? So the number of units that we're supposed to have coming online each year is what, 75, if I read that right, in Montpelier. And, I'm wondering, so I'm thinking about things in like 2 years. I know some people have been on this committee for like a lifetime, maybe, perhaps, maybe a generation. I don't know. How long is this committee? I heard it's been like decades this committee has existed. Has anyone been on this committee for like 10 years?
It's like ancient history. I mean, trying to find.
Yeah. It's really amazing. Okay, well, anyway, I am thinking about it in a 2-year push myself, is what I'm thinking about. Like over the next 2 years, could we do X number of units per year through thinking of ourselves like basically an advocacy organization in line with the city council, either at the beginning or bringing them along, or if we're going to be at odds with the city council, we're really clear on why there's value in that. And that's not where I'm going to start. I'll just be clear on that. But so when we think about the number of units for the committee, do you want to set a goal? I think it's compelling to do it myself. Like I'd be interested in maybe setting a goal of like 25 units a year for the next 2 years, that we look at projects that might deliver that and advocate for that. But that's just a short proposal. What are your thoughts?
What counts? What counts? So on Langdon Street, the stuff above the big shop Sheridan's or something.
Yeah. Well, we can define it.
That's no apartment.
Yeah.
So does that count? Is that,
Yes.
I think that's.
do we need it?
Yeah, you need it.
Do we need it?
Well, sure. I mean, I think if you set a goal, then you have to answer all these questions. You have to back out of it. You have to say, okay, well, what's going to be considered a unit? Is it stuff that's in the pipeline? Is it brand new? Is it, exactly. These are things we would answer. Yeah, we would have to, Tim.
Yeah, having lived through it, I haven't been on the committee all my life, so I've been in real estate almost all my life.
No one's admitting to be on the committee their whole life anyway.
But something we've studied a lot and talked about, I think, and my dad always used to say, and as I've watched over the years, I think he was right. If Montpelier produces 36 new units a year as an average, in the picture, that's historically what we've done. When you take the boom times of the 60s or the 80s, when all the condo projects happened in the early 80s,
Yeah.
even then, if we were putting on 36 to 48 units a year, when we think about Murray Hillsfield and Lane Shops and Freedom Drive in Bed Spring, Sherwood Forest, I mean, all those condo projects happened at the same time. That was as wild as it got.
Yeah.
So, I think saying 75 units a year is a nice aspirational goal, but it's just not based on reality. I think you're more in the right range of 25 to 35.
Yeah, 25 to 35 for us. And it's a little bit like a shot in the dark. Like it's a little bit like we're just putting a marker down, but then it will drive the kinds of proposals we put forward because we'll want to add up to get there, Sandy?
I would like to make a bold suggestion. I would like to see us put a thermometer in front of the city hall. And it would at 30 be minimum, and then maybe far reach at 75 or 50, whatever this group wants. But I think we should put a thermometer. And as projects start going through permitting, they could add yellow. And once they actually are done, construction, they turn green.
We could, put
they
it on
start
our
construction.
Montpelier, Housing Committee website.
At the very least, I actually think we could go bold and,
Yeah.
I mean, everybody in Montpelier.
Okay, so you're into it.
On this issue.
Yeah.
We need, I mean, I think publicity would actually should be a priority.
If you don't want it in the front lawn, it could be inside the front lawn.
I have no opinion about it whatsoever, other than like, I think having, no, I do have an opinion. I think it's a positive. I think building momentum around something is a great thing. I think we need to have a plan before I put it out there so that we know what we're doing, but I think that's positive.
Well, I also don't want to fail, but I think we
Yeah.
could put, it would be worth putting ourselves out there and saying, this is what we are doing to try to get to this. And if we fail, we'll tell you why, how, what happened.
Great.
But I think the idea of going from yellow to green would be inspiring.
Okay, we've got 10 more minutes. I want to hear any other thoughts on this, and then I want to order, make sure these are in the right order, and then talk about financial implications. Okay.
Well, I just, first of all, I just want to say thank you for the conversation, for your participation on the committee. I think one of the goals that we committed to, right, is avoiding or repeat of as iteration of the committee and making sure that there's alignment between the council and the committee on what you're trying to do. So I really do love the approach of like, here are the priorities, and then like, let's research specific initiatives and truth test that with council. And then, that way you just all bought in on the same kind of thing. Tim, enormous respect for your knowledge and that experience, right? Like even in the Wild West, we were doing 35 units a year. We set this really aspirational goal of 75, and I think we all need to acknowledge that, that's 1,500 units in 20 years, that we're not going to be doing 75 units next year, right? And it's really like over the course of 20 years, over decades, can we make this kind of large impact? And I do think it's aligned with what other municipalities are doing. The goals that Rutland has set are pretty aggressive. And so anyway, I just think it's important to think of that. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is like, when I think about the work of this committee and how it can be most effective, it's in creating the conditions to help us achieve that goal as aspirational as it is. So the idea of setting a different goal doesn't, maybe 75 is too high. Well, we're going to find out in 20 years, right? But like, what I guess what I'm trying to say is I think for this committee to be best aligned with the council, it's to what are the shared goals, right? What are you folks like see as initiatives that are going to further that unit, right? That is going to make more housing available. And that way we can all just kind of like get on the same page and support it. So, and I'm just literally using this as an example. I'm not suggesting it one way or the other, but to me, like the vacancy tax is an intriguing idea. I know they're doing that in Burlington. What does it look like in Burlington? Has it been effective in Burlington? Like the council, frankly, doesn't have the time or capacity to research that issue right now and work it out at a council meeting. What would be fantastic is if a committee like this did do the research on it and came to us with a proposal and said, we looked at that vacancy tax like you asked us to. Turns out it won't work here for these reasons. And our recommendation is to move on to something else. Or conversely to say, hey, it's working in Burlington. We think this is what the model would look like here in Montpelier. We recommend that you consider this.
Sorry, I've done a lot of research on vacancy tax already. I'm going to share it so far.
I totally appreciate it. Just like literally saying, just you said the example of how this committee could work. That's kind of the example.
Okay, so you're nicely and potentially softly, but you're saying don't set your own goal, do our goal and support it.
Just to put it frankly, like, yeah, I think that's the role of committees, right? Is that like we've set these goals as a council, we've set a charge, right? Which includes like advancing the goals of the city plan. And, I definitely, and I'm Carrie, or I think Jim was on earlier, speak up. Like, I'm just one voice of the council. I think there's absolutely room for new ideas that we had not considered in the city plan or that are not on our housing. But like, if you folks come up with a strategy that's fantastic, let's hear it. But I think what we're looking this committee for is help in achieving these goals. And what that looks like is researching proposals and recommendations.
I think though that there's a piece of this that there, in terms of the advocate for redevelopment portion, that would be outside of the committee. I mean, it's outside of the council, potentially. Like there could be some work that's a little bit outside the council, so that's something that to consider around that. There could be like literally private engagement around you know, and raising up like information sharing, public meetings, those kinds of things that might be different, like building public support. What were you saying?
So I'm gonna say I disagree a little bit with what Ben said, and I think it was one of the problems that happened in last year's committee. I think it is important for us to have a clear sense of where we're headed and what we're advocating for. Not only buildings that are under construction, but the important thing is which ones are in process. And I do think we need to establish a hierarchy. I think that this is a 1 and a 2 here. Because the housing chapter talks entirely about apartments, rental housing, and that is not my experience of what's needed. So I think to have a clear, I don't think we should need to spend a lot of time talking about it, but without a clear picture of what we are trying to get to, developers don't even have a clear idea.
Yes, I completely agree with that. Right? Like, I mean, I'm gonna, reviewing the kind of 9 proposals that we got for, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna talk about the open room for one quick second, but like, the 9 proposals that we got all have different mixes of, some are all home ownership, some are all rental, some are a mixture of the two. That was actually one of the reasons I advocated for the housing needs assessment, is so that when we actually make decisions around city-owned properties and we have choices, that we're making informed choices based on the data of what's actually needed. And I, believe it or not, agnostic to it. I want to see what the data says and what the market is there, right? And so I think a role of this committee could be to help use the knowledge in this room to assemble that kind of data and help and analyze the assessment to help us make informed decisions, so that when we're in this decision point between A and B, we can say B because we know that's what it is.
Let's do Jan, and then I'm gonna make a proposal of moving forward.
Okay. Just two short things with the list. The capped short-term rentals was a second step after the short-term rental registry was implemented. That so far has not yet been implemented. But I think that one of our recommendations should be to advocate for the creation of that registry. The second is that there was a part of the housing plan that was specifically designated the housing committee that was low effort and high priority, which was a fair housing policy. I don't know where things stand on that, but I don't see that on the list.
Yeah, and where would that doesn't exist now, so we adopt new policies to promote housing under there. Yeah, so it'd be like adding a fair housing policy there.
I don't even know that that's under advocate for redevelopment. I think it's
I said it was, under adopt new policies to promote housing. Yeah, maybe it'll be something like that there. Okay. I would love to hear, I think we should back into this because I don't see it as an either or. Like if we pick a couple people for some of these, like the hierarchy, the ID and assess, like everything except the goal. Like if we picked people to go and do some research on that and come up with a couple straw proposals, we would then, once those proposals are vetted and we understand where we're going to focus on like 5, let's say, potential initiatives over the next year with council support, or we understand where we differ really clearly, and let's try to avoid that if we can. We will then know how many units could be built from that, like how many units we could get from that. And then we could say, okay, based on our initiatives, this is where we're hoping to end up for units. And it just drives to the 75 anyway. So it is just, it could be motivating for people, but not differentiating from another goal. Just you're looking at what you're already doing and then saying this is what we can get from it. So I just don't think we need to make it like it being a difference when I think it's like very much moving in the same direction. So how do and I agree we should make these into a hierarchy. I feel like we should probably do that after we know what initiatives fall under them, because if we pick certain initiatives and other ones, it might really change people's thinking. So my proposal to you, did you have something, Steve? Did you have something?
Just quickly for clarification, I just want to make sure I understand the hierarchy. Are you talking about the hierarchy of the priorities?
Yeah.
Or this priority established hierarchy of desired development?
No, the hierarchy of priorities. Like Sandy was saying, I think advocating for redevelopment should go up to 3.
Great.
Yeah, and I was saying, well, let's hold it for just a second while we figure out what we're gonna do
I
within
think
that.
your, the city level regs is
Yeah.
important as 3.
Yeah.
And actually, I wanted to advocate, I wanted to volunteer to work on that one.
Yeah, so let's talk about who might be interested in which ones, and then we gotta move to talking about the budget for it to get stuff in tomorrow. But so let's ignore the set units goal for committee, and actually the established hierarchy of desired development. I'm wondering, Christian and Lori, if that is something that like you might take on, or even, we could change the language to not be so advocacy focused, but it's basically like what we were seeing in the data are things like starter homes, multifamily homes, ADA accessible homes, 2 to 4 bedrooms, like those are the kinds of things we're seeing. Could you at least, do you think you could establish a hierarchy of desired development based on the data you have and then share it back with us or not?
Get back to you.
Okay, all right.
Has the city plan already done that at some level? We just gone through a whole.
I don't think
Why
it's-
people take something.
Yeah, I don't think it's that granular. I don't.
It's like a bucket of this is a priority, like these 8 types of housing are priorities over the standard 4-bedroom, home or whatever.
I think that they exist. That's what the developers in the RFQ response said, is that we need, and I argued when we first commissioned 4,000 or something to there, the scope was not big enough. The developers are saying we need a housing market.
Yeah.
And differentiating whether a housing market study should be an ask for the budget is something that you should consider, because what you're asking is how many of what kinds of units we would need where. And that, I think, is beyond the scope of what RPC has been challenged to do.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I confirm all those points. A market study would be great. I defer to someone with more real estate experience to say if you could really build a robust one in a small market like Montpelier, because they are very expensive, orders of magnitude more expensive than an RPC. So
I think we can get directional trends though, like directional feedback. And I say that because one thing I don't want, and maybe people disagree, but we are orienting toward being a very action focused committee. And I would hate to see us feeling like we need to go research for the next 2 months a hierarchy, when really like we need to get development moving, and like if it could be elder housing, like low income housing, whatever, like these top 5 things you identify, any of that would probably be a benefit to this community.
yeah, I mean, I think right off the top, we can do that sort of lit review, best practices, what's been successful elsewhere. It's an academic analysis from our armchair, right? We don't have that skin in the game. Usually the developer comes in and they are motivated by profit to have that information in their pocket. It's not to say the city can't pay for it. These market analysis do exist. I think they're in the range of 65 to 70,000.
A month?
60 to 75,000 for that kind of proprietary, because generally they're attached to someone who's going to make even more money,
Okay,
right? So there's a.
all right, so I'm hearing like maybe, I'm not
Let
sure.
us get back to you. Let us see what's out
Yeah,
there.
okay.
Low-hanging fruit. Try
Okay.
to give you trends. Trends I always worry about. Trends are not causation. They're, you can.
I'm gonna put myself on that with you.
Yeah, I think that yeah.
Christian, I'm putting myself on that as point with you.
Okay.
Also, I sent
Sounds
you
like a plan.
an email about linking some of your data sources together to.
We're trying to work back through that.
Is that-
Some of it we just haven't been able to.
Okay, I'm gonna move can we move to my points? Will you just quickly look down the list and think which one you want to work on the most? And we'll go down and like do 2 people per bucket. And then the charge will be to come back in January to have talks between now and January and to come back with some suggestions on your top
So,
2 to 3.
We're talking the column that says priority.
The column that says priority, yeah, and then you figure out the detail, you figure out the initiatives you think are the most 2 to 3, top 2 to 3. And I will work with each of the I will work with each of the subgroups. So if there are any questions, we can figure it out together. And it just doesn't have to be perfect. Like, we'll just do what we can over the next month to get some proposals to consider together. So Tim, what interests you here?
I think identifying city level regs, pretty buried.
Okay,
Trying to build a house right now, I have an intimate experience with it.
okay, Sandy?
Same.
Same, okay, if this isn't gonna work out in the end, we'll recalibrate. Dan?
Well, so the advocate for redevelopment, I mean, well, I guess.
It's a big bucket.
Yeah, maybe that's not.
Well, and you just figure out like what you
I
think.
think it'd be, I would like to, look at, survey downtown building potential residential, I mean, looking at
That kind of thing.
that kind of thing, whether
Okay.
or not that's.
Dan, we'll put you on the committee, you'll come back to. Matt, you want in on that?
No, it's being done.
Oh, it's being done.
Yes. Nick in my office is working with Montpelier a lot to come up with a survey of all of the businesses downtown and who owns the buildings. And
But Dan can still get in, I think he's helping to
Absolutely.
shape that.
Because there's undeveloped lots and.
Yeah,
I'm glad to go over minutes.
that's great, okay. Sean,
I'm happy to jump in wherever is helpful. I mean, I put more thought, I think a lot to what Ben was saying, really with that, setting that goal into what in this name. I think our goal, I think, as a committee really, our work really is, I think, fit within what the city's council charges us with. It does charging with the 75 goal, it's, even way more than the heyday. I think that's got to be our organizing driving piece. And if that means looking at all of these, or where are we going to hit the big home runs in ways that, with even the condo days, you're thinking much more home runs in condos. If that's these small houses, if it's senior housing, big complex with tons of units, or we call it, it's got to be home run level. So I think breaking from that, it would come to which of those have financial upside, which are regulation or whatever else. It seems like there's kind of that first level assessment for all of these groups. And so to that level, I'd be happy to jump in wherever it'd be helpful. I don't know as much about the agency tax side. It sounds like Matt does. Maybe there isn't a need there, but or some of the particular areas. But I'm happy to be slotted in wherever it'd be helpful.
thank you. Matt, do you want in on this? Like, do you want to work on any of these?
I need to work on that.
Yeah, which one do you want?
There's a list of checks here, things that I'm already working on, which is about 50% of the things on the list.
Is there one that has a lot of checks next to it that you think you would be, or do you want to just work with all the committee? All the subcommittees?
On call. I mean, I don't think that's supposed to be my role.
All right, you keep thinking. And do you want to work on any of that?
No, I actually just want to be a partner, be supportive as I can be, and be a liaison back to the
Okay.
council, which I think is what my job is here.
Okay.
Same thing.
Carrie, did you have something you want to get more granular?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ben that that's basically our role, and I am extremely interested in short-term rentals.
Yeah.
And so I would really like to I'm going to spend some time looking at that anyway. I would love to do that with anyone else or,
Great. We'll have you on adopt new policies to promote housing. That's vacancy tax, short-term rentals, air rate, need fair housing policy. Okay, Alex.
I could do either redevelopment or adopt new policies, but I'm not interested in short-term rental. I'm
Okay.
interested in air rights. Vacancy tax, been up a couple of times before. The last committee recommended.
Alex, why don't we put you down on advocate for redevelopment?
I'll be on the
Adopting new policies? Okay. So
That can also be on city-owned properties.
I'm gonna put, city-owned properties, okay, you're willing to do both?
Yeah.
What's your last name again, Ramon?
COPPS.
Okay, great. I just have Dan W, Dan C. I will put myself on assess city level housing initiative. I'm gonna put Lauren on that too, because she, I think, is into it. Anyone else want to work on support housing on city-owned properties?
I'm doing that as a volunteer. I think the one observation I want to offer is that the path we're on with both our city plan and country club road may not be the same. And this committee may need to step up and fill that gap.
Yeah, okay.
Which might involve a budget ask for a master plan.
The fund housing trust fund, we might be able to just deal with that, dispense with that now as we move to the budget.
Can you put me on the adopting policy as well?
Yeah.
The application.
Yep.
So I suggested a separate topic earlier, which is the other side of tax stabilization and what is the impact on doing this.
Yeah.
And I would like to suggest that I'm happy to help work on that. I don't think I can do the major prisons, but I just was asking Tim if he would be willing to, sit down and take a stab at it.
The chip people.
Okay, great, thanks. Perfect. Okay, let's talk about let me just wrap up the charge here. So the charge is that we are going to talk to each other, people, so I'm doing the established hierarchy with Christian, the ID and assess city level regs, creating barriers are Tim and Sandy, assess and package city level housing initiative, me and Lauren, supporting housing on city owned properties, it's Dan C, thinking about that. Adopt new policies to promote housing is Carrie, Dan C, and Alex. Funding housing trust, no one, because we're going to talk about it in a second. Advocate for redevelopment, Dan W and Alex, and then Tim and Sandy are going to talk about the grant list. And Matt is going to be a resource. You probably will need to then send us anything you have or are working on to the point people so that we know, we don't want to duplicate efforts. So if you have anything, please send it along, Matt, or if you have ideas or.
These will be folders on the website. It's very easy.
Oh, yeah, Sean, hey, can you do support housing on city-owned properties with Dan?
Sure.
See, and then, yeah, we'll put you on there for now. I forgot you. Thank you.
And will these be folders on the site, each subcommittee will have its own set of.
Eventually, we haven't done anything yet, but okay, so two other things. First is, we have a website that is on the city site that, it's Nick, right, Matt? Nick has put up for us. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom of the housing committee webpage, you have, there are resource documents that are linked there. So instead of like having to track all my emails, you can just go there. I'm gonna make sure, we only have a couple of the documents up so far, but I'm gonna send him the rest and he'll post them for us. That's gonna be a really long list, but that's where our work is gonna be shown. The other is, what do we want in the budget? Based on the conversations that we just had, I think the easiest thing is we say fund the housing trust fund at $250,000, which is what we've said we needed to do every year, and lots of years have not done it.
We may need, I think it's worth asking Barry about, maybe Christian, what was their survey? And how did it turn out? What money went into giving incentives for infill? Underused properties.
Before we do that info, can we talk about the housing trust fund, the proposal that I just put out, like $250,000? Can we vote on this? Like, how many people, does anyone have any questions or thoughts on that before? Yes.
Yeah, I do have a question about that. It's kind of looking at Tim and Carrie on this, or maybe somebody else who knows, just the historic purposes of the housing trust fund. And like, I know it's to incentivize developments, or, I know that like for, when someone went down street, or it could be used for homeownership or to buy down, whatever, but like, can it also be used, is it flexible enough to be able to do that infill study as well, right? So could you just say, we're going to fund the housing trust fund at $250,000, which has been the recommendation for years, I guess my question is, could you legally use it in different ways to promote the different projects in your?
No.
Not under the current guidelines, but we could review the guidelines because there's nothing, that should be a fairly periodic process anyway.
It was the accomplishment of the last iteration of this committee.
And I'm just trying to remember what it allowed
And it
for.
was ADU.
It's, well, so really there's only one, which is the affordable housing grants, which are for not-for-profit developers. And that typically the award amounts for that I believe are up to $50,000. The council.
Yeah, sounds good.
So we're gonna have to share
And then
equity.
Tim, and then Sean.
Yeah, well, those Downstreet has plenty of funding.
I want to go to Karen.
Sorry. Yeah, Dan knows what the regulations say. And the history is that we haven't funded it for 2 straight years at least now. So if we don't fund it this year, it would be the 3rd year it's not funded.
Yeah, okay. Tim?
Couple of things. I think in terms of how it's been used in the past, Dan's right, except for the $50,000 limit. But I think what's happened is it's been Montpelier's share in some significant projects to help them happen. And it shows the city's skin in the game, and it's well perceived by all the other people that line up and making these projects happen, like the transit center and the housing that just happened on Hubbard Street. It's been successful. Generally, Downstreet's been the partner we've worked with on.
Oh, good thing.
So I think that's good. I think in terms of having funds, if you want to do a housing study, I wouldn't put it into the housing trust fund. That's a decision the council can just make and just put that much less into the housing trust fund. I guess if you're trying to put it on the same piece. And the third piece for me is just having come out of it and being really glad that I don't have to do it this year. The budget process is brutal and heart-wrenching. And without fail, I think what happens is when you get toward the end of the line, we probably should amazing critical decisions about people's jobs and critical services to provide the community. That's where the housing trust fund isn't making the cut. And I don't think this year is going to be any different, unfortunately. So I'm not sure that's the best thing.
You could take a portion of the local option tax funded from that.
That's a
But
different.
still, that's not lining up for supporting Montpelier Alive was a key function of it when it was set up. And then looking at infrastructure,
Right,
we're just so far behind that.
But would you still put it in, Tim?
You can't, I wouldn't. So I think it's like, put it in, it's not gonna happen, or you're gonna get maybe 100 and not 250, or is there something better we could ask for that would motivate the council, that would hold through this gauntlet that you're gonna be going?
I'm gonna go to Sean and then Sandy and then me, because I talked to Kelly about that today. Okay, Sandy?
No, you go.
She basically said it's already in there. She basically said there's a placeholder already anticipating that we would ask for it in the budget.
Yeah.
Which basically, she goes, it's not gonna be at the level you want as a placeholder, but you should ask for it. So I feel like we should ask for it.
I'm just saying, should we ask for something better?
We can ask for more than one thing.
Yeah, but everybody does that. That's why we're in financial trouble.
Well, we don't have, there are a couple other things I wanna propose asking for, but let's go over to Dan and then Sandy and then me.
I do think the city has obligated itself to fund it at least $54,000 in order to get it to the $150,000 that by its own guidelines should be made available for grants. The city doesn't have to award any of those grants, but we're at 95 and it should be at 150. So that was the policy that the city adopted. So we could remind council of that. But I certainly support making the bigger ask of 250,000.
Sandy?
I'm still curious about what Tim means by do better. I mean, one thing that St. Albans does is they actually buy land and then they give it. That's completely different from contributing to a housing project.
They buy what?
Individual house project. They actually buy land to do it to, and that's the
You haven't thinking about
part of
it.
the funding step. So So that's one area. The other I've heard tonight is a market study, an actual market study. And the third thing I'm suggesting is to find out what Barry's analysis cost and figure out what we've been doing already, what holes exist to get a complete package that's actually useful, and then set up some amount of money for an advocate or somebody. What we asked for this last year, who was working up to asking for this last year, of having there be some part-time person in Montpelier who goes around and helps people after their property is identified, actually consider building and filling.
Okay.
Because just identifying them doesn't do anything.
I think that we're blurring, like, you buy land and the advocate for infill and having an advocate is essentially blurring into the work that these committees are gonna be doing and putting the proposals forward. So I think maybe we get there, but do we want to, it seems like we've done no process to put that forward, I'm just recognizing. Like, we have never talked about that until the last 5 seconds, and then we would be asking for a money ask. And so I would do a little bit more process to get alignment and the best idea and all of that.
We spent a lot of time on it last year.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, so maybe 50% of the room's right. Yeah.
Or less.
Or less, right. Okay, so the housing trust is a little bit easier because it's something that the council has set year after year, and something we heard like 15 minutes on last time, and we talked about worth that I feel a lower lift. The market study, we should talk about if that's something we want to do. There's one other thing I want to put on, which is, I understand there are fewer development proposals coming into Montpelier in the past couple of years, that has been going down. If that is true, and they're considering, there were some rumors, which could be totally false, so I could be spreading rumors here, but that the development fees may need to go up because you have fewer proposals coming in, to then cover the gap in the budget. I think that's the wrong direction. So I had thought of, like, maybe a placeholder here in the request is to not raise development fees over the next year as well. Because it just freezes everything, gives us a little time to do a review. We can also just confirm, Matt, do you know if they're gonna be raised, if they're supposed to be raised?
Absolutely. No, I don't.
Yeah.
I would say, I think what I'm overhearing in the office is that they're researching what other cities are doing, and Montpelier is dramatically lower in all of its fees.
This is where
What I'm overhearing.
I just think we should freeze it for a year to, like, let us do work and then consider those things. It would be unfortunate to right out of the gate have a budget that is raising development fees while we're having a conversation about promoting development.
It's true.
Yeah. So given that, I think I would like to vote on freezing the development fees. But that would take, like, process and conversation. We want to know, like, what do we want to lower them to, and, like, what's our proposal for what to lower them to, and, like, all of those kinds of things.
At least gets the possibility on the table.
Yeah, it could. So here's the things we have to vote on: the 250 for housing trust fund, the freeze development fees, and then the market study. Does someone want to speak to the market study? Can someone talk about why we would want to ask for that? What is the information it's going to give us that we don't already have? Is it worth 60 or 70,000? Like, what's the case there? Yes.
I mean, I've been part of these in other organizations. They bring their proprietary information. Some of it's not going to be terribly shocking to you. It's going to kind of confirm your buyers. One market study might just be, well, we need more of everything, right? And now you've been all great getting back to where you started. Doesn't mean it's a bad idea,
I mean, I'll say that when we talked about the housing needs assessment, right, at the Expo, we looked at a number of different examples, you know, including like the VHFA outline, which you have followed, right, which I totally appreciated. But I looked at some of the other models that Mike had brought forward as examples of like a $60,000. And to be honest, I didn't see a lot in it that was beyond what, there was a lot of information that was confirming what was already known from the kind of work they did. That was kind of consistency.
I think why the developers asked for that related to Country Club Road is because there are proposals to do only $1 million residences there, or to do lots of little tiny homes. And to know who in Montpelier would want to live at Country Club Road if they could get a house for 200,000 or on land trust land for even less than that is essential information for how we decide to develop that up there. We have not yet picked a developer. We might not until the brownfield's cleaned up, but we really need to realize the opportunity. And since we own it, we don't know how we would want to develop it without market study analysis.
Well, then, you know, you're making the point though, that committee could be putting that forward. That's
Yes.
not something we have been focused on at all. That committee, there is a Country Club Road.
No, those three counselors don't do anything that was in the Whitenburg.
Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with what Steve's saying, that I think a market study is essential to understand what is called for and what's needed. And I also want to speak to Sandy's point earlier about, you know, that there's a demand that's out there. Market studies are usually based on comps or what other municipalities are doing. So I think it misses the mark potentially in gaining the real information about what Montpelier needs, and that maybe there's an alternative solution for us starting out there. I don't know what that looks like, but I don't know that a market study.
Yeah, maybe I'm calling it the wrong thing. A needs analysis is what I'm imagining, and we just got data from the regional planning commission. We didn't get any.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the you know, to your point, I think the housing section is a really great tool. And it's almost like you just need some vanilla layer of granular analysis.
Yeah, okay, Alex and then Christian.
I think that the market analysis on top of kind of money the city council has already been putting out for trying to figure out what to do will threaten the housing money, putting in competition for the money, and will not fit well. Because I think people think we need all kinds of stuff. And so why should we spend? I mean, there's no question it might give us some information, but I just think it will put other things in jeopardy.
Christian. Oh, sorry, Alex.
Sure. Sorry, I just lost my thought. So with the data we have before us, one of the things we want to look at is also was a part informed by Sandy's recommendations and the kind of data she was looking for that field formed is clearly linking the developer of houses, the developer and housing costs. And by doing that immediately, you're going to see where the largest gap is. You don't know what you need to build. You don't know how many rooms it needs. You don't know anything else, but you know how much it has to cost if you're going to meet that need. So that might be a really good place to start when you're thinking of policy leverage you might be able to pull to facilitate that development. And the second point is I'll put on that kind of take a regional scope, and one thing that other committee municipalities do for some of their committees is give the committee a budget so they can run additional studies if they want, buy specific data if they want, hire GIS mapping services if Nick is overrun, or pay for a dashboard or something like that while you're thinking it. So just throwing that out as something that I haven't heard any mention.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to move us to a vote in a moment because I want to recognize that it's time to go. So we're going to vote and then adjourn. The next meeting is going to be on January 6th at 6 p.m. I'll see if we can get it here. I in terms of the amount of time, we're gonna have to talk to each other, done the research, come back with proposals. Do you want a 1 hour meeting, 1.5, or 2 hour? I basically forced the 2 hour meeting. I think it was necessary for this conversation. But in terms of the time you want to spend on the next meeting, what's palatable for you? I'm not gonna like push the 2 hour again if no one's into it.
I'm used to it.
You're used to it. Alex, what do you think?
As long as we don't go longer than the council.
Yeah, okay. You don't care.
It's fun.
You're fine. Sandy,
I'm fine with that.
you're
At least
okay.
I'm.
One more. Okay, Tim.
I'm here for an hour and a half. Well, the last half hour is been.
Yeah. Fine. Okay. So we can do, let's say, an hour and a half. Because we have two people who I think would like that, and I did push for the 2 hours, and if we have to go 2 hours the next time, fine. It is important to have some room for discussion, I think, around here. So the vote is on the Housing Trust Fund and freezing development fees. I'm going to propose to you that we table the market study because we aren't quite sure what we're doing for priorities and where your data set for the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission is going to come down. So it just feels a little premature to be asking for that lump of money before we have our priorities or we have an end product over here. So, yes.
I think I'm gonna push back on you about this. This advocating for redevelopment is really important.
That's fine.
And we're
I'll put it
making
up
the
for
budget.
budget.
Well, what I want to suggest is that maybe the planning department or the planning commission could tell us what was done in Barry, because they have something set up for the next steps after properties are identified.
Mhm.
And if we could, within the budget process, start to create a placeholder. And then even on January 2nd, if this committee has to talk about it, but it seems that there is a next step. Keeping in mind that this budget is from coming July to the next July, that's a really far, 18 months from now. It would be good to start something, some kind of program.
For the housing trust fund to fund that.
Yeah, we could redo the guidelines
I
if
think
we
it's
wanted
not.
to, but right now it's not.
Well,
It would have
my
to be-
point is that 18 months is a long time to not do anything with these.
But couldn't we also go to the council with a separate thing? We have a plan, the housing committee,
Yeah, we
we plan on
certainly could.
development, you need that.
I just don't want anything to get dropped with things.
People are fried and want to go. So I would like to bring it to a vote on the 250,000 for the housing trust. We can do, Tim, if you want to do a counter proposal for a lower number, I'll do the 250 and then you can do a counter proposal, we can vote on the lower number. And then see where we get. But I think my suggestion would be we start with a higher number. It's going to be negotiated down anyway. And they'll decide, the council will have to decide as they're doing the budget. So all in favor of or can I have a motion for the 200, let me make the motion for the 250,000 for the housing trust funds. All in favor?
I'll second.
Second motion, thank you. All in favor, can you raise your hands? For 250, okay. Great, opposed? Okay. Would anyone like to count up a proposal for the amount of money for the housing trust fund?
Based on the numbers, and I just think there's less conversation about each of these issues than we think, because there's so much going on in public council.
Yeah.
I would propose $100,000. Well, we're really trying to be realistic and not fair, but we're trying to make things happen. Try to get that. Because I think if you have 250, you may get zero.
It's your recommendation. I mean, I can just say that speaking as one counselor, like we've identified housing being our number one priority, and this is like the easiest way to demonstrate that we're committed to it, right? This is like
It supports housing, but doesn't create that.
Tim, you can make a motion if you'd like.
I guess I'd move that we propose $100,000 to city council for the housing trust fund.
Does anyone want to second that? Okay, guys, thank you. Then can people vote on freezing development fees? I'd like a motion to freeze. Second. Okay, all in favor? Okay, any
I have no
opposed?
idea on what basis.
No, not raising development fees.
That's great.
Okay, Alex abstains, great, thank you. And for the market study, Someone needs to make a motion if you want to put that forward.
Can I make an amendment?
Yes,
To have a placeholder amount for future study based on the housing data, or the housing assessment data that was provided.
How would that go? What exactly, help me frame that.
So rather than come out of the 250, you're asking for another placeholder of 75 or something like
No,
that.
not even that much. And I don't even know that we specify an amount, just say that we would like there to be a further analysis of the data provided in the housing assessment. We think council should
Fund it.
should have an idea of what, have that in their considerations.
So you're saying, I don't know if that's gonna be a budget, that might actually be a policy recommendation. Or you could say there needs to be further, I think what you're saying.
So what I'm hearing is that we don't know what we need. We know we need something.
Yes,
We don't know how much it's gonna cost. But we'd like council to be aware that that further study may be needed
yeah,
and be prepared for that in their budget considerations.
I can just write that.
Okay.
Further study may be needed, for budget considerations based on market, trends, coming out of the data.
Yeah.
Can you help me, I'm gonna email it to you, and then I'll email it to the group, yeah. Can
I don't know.
are there,
I think we might need to vote on it.
just to,
Yeah, the council's.
okay, for, help, can you state what you'd like to say? Further study may be
The
needed for.
housing committee recommends that the council keep space in budget considerations for a study elaborating on the data provided in the Montpelier housing needs assessment.
Say it one more time.
Yeah. The housing committee recommends
Yeah,
that the city council, I can't remember the rates. Be aware of the need for development, further study of somebody plays that with tape.
the housing committee recommends that the city council be aware of the need for further study.
Budget requirement, the budget requirement for further study building on the CVRPC product.
I can deal with that.
The housing committee recommends that the city council be aware of the need for budget requirements for potential, but budget requirements, building on the CVPC study. Yes.
It really required.
Budget needs, we'll say,
Yeah.
budget needs. Okay, would you like to make a motion, Dan, to
I move that.
move, anyone want a second? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Abstained? So you got Sean opposed and Tim abstains. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn? Thanks, everyone. I'll see you later. I'm sorry we're running a few minutes late.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.